This lesson is on VLOOKUPs and learning how to complete them in under 5 minutes. So let's jump right in. What is a VLOOKUP? VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup. It is a function that makes Excel search for a certain value in a column in order to return a value from a different column in the same row. When would you use a VLOOKUP? An example would be finding an employee name in one table based on their ID in a separate table. And that is the example we'll be using today in our data set. If you'd like to follow along using the same data, I'll leave a link in the description down below. Right here we have an example of what our VLOOKUP formula looks like. And it consists of 4 parts. The first part is the lookup value, which is the value from the first table that you want to find in the second table. The second part is the table array, which is the range or second table that you want to look up in. The third part is the column index number, which is the column number that references the table where the value is that we want to look up. Finally, the fourth part is the range lookup, which indicates if you want an exact match, an appropriate, or an approximate match. I know that sounds like a lot at first, but let's get through this. It's a lot simpler than it looks, and once you get the hang of this, you'll be doing these in your sleep in no time. So in our first table here, we have a bunch of sales orders, which include an employee ID, an order number, and an order amount. In our second table, we have sales reps, which includes an employee ID, a rep name, and a rep region. So we have our sales order table here on the left, and we have all these employee IDs, but we don't have any employee names. We want to find out who sold each one of these orders so that we could give them a commission credit for it. So what we're going to do is insert a new column here, and we're going to call this rep name, because that's what we want to bring in from our other table here on the right. What we're going to do is we're going to type equals VLOOKUP, which starts our VLOOKUP formula, and we're going to do an open parentheses, and you'll see the details of what each component of these VLOOKUPs that you need to include pop up right below, which match our definition of what each one of those different inputs are over here. So the first one, as we said, is our lookup value. We want to look up this employee ID in cell B4 in this table over here. So for our first value, we're going to put in B4. To get to the next part, we're going to put a comma in, and then our table array. Our table array, as we said, is our range to look up in. This is our range to look up in over here, this entire table. So we're going to highlight starting in cell G4, drag all the way down to I18, which highlights our entire table array. Now, when we copy this formula down, we're going to want it to reference this same area, regardless of which one of these cells that we put this formula in. So we're going to make these absolute. You can just click in the middle of the G4, hit F4, and it'll put these dollar signs in between the G and the 4 and right before the G. Same thing with I18 here. We hit F4. You could also type these dollar signs in. It'll give you the same result. So once we have our table array in, we're going to hit comma again, and then we're going to need to put in our column index. So we want to return the rep name from the employee ID. It's always going to look up in this first column here. So we reference cell B4 for our employee ID. So it's going to start in the left column and look up that ID first. But then we need to tell this formula which one of these other columns we want the value returned from. So in this case, we want rep name, which is the second column. G is our first column, H would be the second. So we're going to put a 2 here to reference that second column. Now our last portion of this is we need to type in either true or false. True is basically telling this formula to give you an approximate match for that cell B4 that we're looking up. In this case, we know all of our employee IDs match the employee IDs in this table, so we want an exact match. So we're going to put false. And we do close parentheses, hit enter. Now we can see this employee ID, 66566, returned us Kenny. If we look up on our table over here, we can see 66566 returns Kenny. Now say we realized, oh, we may have screwed up. We actually wanted the region which this employee ID was in. We could just go back to our formula here. We want to change this column reference. Before we had it at 2, which would give us a second column in this table. And say now we want to change that to region. All we have to do is change that 2 to 3, and that'll change it to the third column in our reference array. Hit enter. You see now it's going to return east. So employee 66566 is in the east. Like we said, we actually want employee name, so we're going to change this back to 2. And we're going to take this, in this little box in the corner here, we're going to take this and drag this all the way down to the bottom. And that will fill in all of these rep names for these corresponding employee IDs over here. So we can see employee ID 665626. Let's see, 665626, referencing Mike. The value we returned is Mike, so our formula is correct. Some common errors that happen when doing VLOOKUPs. As I indicated, you need to put in these dollar signs in between each one of these cell references here, making that absolute. And basically that's saying is when you drag this down, it's not going to move your cell reference. So if we just delete these out. So for this first cell, we're referencing G4 to I-18 like we highlighted here. But in these other cases, if we drag this down, we can see we're getting all these NAs. Why are we getting those NAs, those errors? Because we didn't put in those absolute dollar signs, and now, as we dragged it down, it's referencing those cells that are further down. It also drags down your array. So you always want to make sure you have those absolute dollar signs in there so that when you pull this down, it'll stay from the first cell to the last cell, referencing that same array. Another example is not having an exact match. When we're referencing this cell here and telling it to look up in this table, it needs to be exactly the same in this table as what we're referencing in this table. So in this case, if our ID in this table is 66566-1, we put that, we could see that we're going to get an error right away because there is nothing in this table, in this first column, which we're referencing to, that says 665566-1. It needs to be exactly the same. So you will get some errors if you try and do that to a table that doesn't match exactly. And VLOOKUPs, we can do these across different tabs. This does not have to be on the same tab. If this data set is on a different sheet, we could simply reference it the same exact way. I'm going to copy this over, paste it right here in this other sheet. I'm going to delete out our formulas, and I'm going to start a new VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP, we want to look up the value in cell B4. Next is our table array, which is now on sheet 2. Highlight all of these. Once again, make sure we add the dollar signs. Now you can see in our formula up here, it's going to reference sheet 2, cell C4 to E18. We still want the value in the second column of what we reference. It's not the columns in order from A, B, C, D. It's the column, the second column in the reference of the array. So we're going to hit column 2. And once again, we want an exact match. So we're going to hit false. Close parentheses, enter. You can see we got Kenny. Drag this down. We'll have all those same references. All right, that is your VLOOKUPs in 5 minutes. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe. It really helps out my channel. And also, if you have any questions or comments or anything you would like to see, feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know what you want to learn in Excel, and I'll make a video on it. Thanks again for watching.